Hello, my name is Alexia Lennox, and I'm joined here today by William LeBlanc of Mi'kmaq First Nation.
Hello, nice to meet you, Alexia.
Nice to meet you, William.
Yes, I'm from the Mi'kmaq First Nation, Bear River, Nova Scotia.
I'm glad to have you on today. So first, I'd like to ask you, how has racism toward Indigenous peoples affected you throughout your life? This could be family, sense of identity, sort of anything, any way that it's affected you.
Well, since I live off reserve, I think racism manifests itself in more subtle and sometimes indirect ways. For example, coworker, a neighbor, or even a friend, when they learn that I'm Indigenous, it has happened that they will make light of it by disguising it as humor. So, for example, "Hey, Chief, how's it going?"
Right.
Or, "At least you don't pay taxes," which is not true.
Right.
We pay property taxes, we pay federal taxes, we pay income taxes, just like everybody else. Sometimes it might be a little more direct. For example, keep the alcohol away from Will. I have to say that making light of one's culture and identity cuts a person deep, regardless of the person's identity.
Right. So you sort of face those stereotypes throughout your everyday life.
It definitely happens from time to time. It definitely does not happen every day, but absolutely. Again, I mean, people, once they learn of it, it's very indirect when they have to deal with you on a daily basis. But racism is racism. It's easy to see, it's easy to hear.
Right.
It's not a joke.
Right. So, has systemic racism ever caused you to be denied something other Canadians are not? For example, healthcare or anything else that maybe you see other people getting an easier time with?
Well, I'm going to take this in a bit of a different direction. So, systemic racism has denied myself, my siblings, and our children our full identity, our language, and our culture. Due to the Catholic Church and various levels of government, my grandmother and her siblings were sent to residential schools to learn the European ways, to become civilized, and to remove the savage from our people. This is the single most debilitating thing taken from us. We've lost so much, and very few elders continue to speak the Mi'kmaq language or other First Nation languages. This is something we can't get back. It's something that I wish I had the opportunity, but it really isn't there anymore.
Were you given the opportunity to sort of get back into the culture and the traditions that you were denied the opportunity to involve yourself with? Would you take the opportunity?
The challenge for me now, of course, is I no longer live anywhere near the Mi'kmaq Nations. I live in Ontario. However, if the opportunity was there, and it was something that was available to me, I would take the opportunity. I think the point to make is that even the elders who are alive today are the same elders who also went to residential schools and have fought to find what was missing in their lives, to reteach themselves what our ancestors were doing and how they did it. The ceremonies, the clothing, the full culture. It's still something that even today we're still trying to rediscover. So it is challenging, even when the opportunity arises, that the lessons, the teachings would be not what they could have been.
Right, of course. And finally, how has your connection with your Indigenous heritage been affected by racism toward Indigenous peoples, whether that be direct racism or systemic racism?
Yeah, I just talked a fair bit about my heritage in a way. I think that the systemic racism we just spoke of kind of indicates the connection to my Indigenous heritage is fleeting and hard to discover. I always am wanting to learn more about my family history. However, due to the lack of record keeping and the forcing of European names, which sometimes could have been somewhat random, especially we're talking about surnames, that Native families were basically given surnames that didn't mean anything to them at some point. However, that's what we have today, and because of that forcing of names and lack of good record keeping, especially when you go back at least 3 generations, it becomes extremely challenging to learn more about the history. If you were researching a European family member, the records I can go back to the 1600s, no problem, in France. However, our Indigenous heritage, I can only go back 3 generations. I know who my great grandfather is on paper, but that's where it stops.
Right. Thank you for joining me today. It's been a pleasure having you on.
You're welcome. I hope you can take something away from this chat.